At first glance, everything looks active. Listings are rising, options are everywhere. Agents sound busy, homes are showing. On the surface, this feels like momentum returning. More supply should mean more movement, more choice should unlock decisions. That's the story most people expect to see playing out right now. But if you stay with the data a little longer, something doesn't line up. Homes are visible, yet commitments are scarce. Buyers browse, tour, save listings, ask smart questions, and then pause. Inventory expands, but velocity doesn't follow. Activity exists without resolution. The market looks louder, but outcomes feel quieter than they should. That contradiction creates a subtle tension. We're conditioned to believe more listings fix slow markets. When scarcity eases, pressure should ease too, freeing buyers to act. Yet instead of acceleration, we're seeing hesitation. Not fear, not rejection, just delay. And that delay is easy to miss if you're only watching surface signals. If you've been paying attention, you've probably felt this already. Conversations stretch longer. Decisions don't close faster. Interest feels polite rather than urgent. Nothing appears broken, yet progress feels heavier. The gap between visibility and velocity widens quietly, without headlines or drama. This is where most people misread the moment. They assume the market needs time to absorb new supply. They wait for inventory to do the work urgency used to do. But inventory alone doesn't create commitment. It only creates choice. And choice changes behavior in ways that don't announce themselves. What's happening here isn't a lack of demand. It's a shift in how demand expresses itself. Buyers aren't rushing just because options exist. They're evaluating differently. They're moving slower on purpose. And that creates the illusion of health while momentum quietly thins underneath. Recognizing this early doesn't make you pessimistic. It makes you observant. Markets don't loudly. They stall politely through pauses that feel reasonable until patterns repeat. Subscribe and hit the bell. Slowdowns don't announce themselves. There was a time when rising listings sent a clear signal. More homes meant buyers finally had leverage. Competition cooled. Decisions sped up. Sellers adjusted. Deals became cleaner, calmer, more rational. Inventory was the release valve that restored balance, and buyers responded with confidence and action. That mental model is still widely believed, and it's exactly why this moment is being misread. People see listings climb and expect urgency to follow. They assume buyers will feel relief and step forward. But that sequence no longer holds, because the psychology that powered it has changed. In the past, scarcity created stress, and inventory relieved it. Today, inventory creates something else entirely: optionality. And optionality doesn't rush people. It slows them down. When buyers see more choices, they don't feel pressure to decide. They feel permission to wait. This is the core shift most observers miss. Opportunity used to mean access. Now it means flexibility. Buyers aren't asking, "Can I finally buy?" They're asking, "Why should I buy now?" More listings answer the first question, but not the second. That creates cognitive dissonance for sellers and agents. On paper, conditions look healthier, supply is improving. The environment feels less extreme. Yet behavior doesn't match the narrative. Buyers don't accelerate. They browse longer. They compare more. They delay without guilt. Rising listings also change how buyers interpret risk. When inventory grows but homes don't move quickly, buyers assume others already evaluated and passed. Time on market reframes value. What once looked like opportunity begins to feel questionable, even if nothing is wrong with the property itself. This is why increased supply no longer triggers urgency. Urgency comes from perceived consequence, not availability. And right now, buyers don't feel punished for waiting. They've learned that patience often improves outcomes. They've watched price cuts appear later. They've seen sellers return with better terms. That experience reshaped behavior permanently. So inventory isn't broken. It's just doing something different. It's expanding choice without creating commitment. It's offering access without imposing deadlines. And in that environment, old assumptions fail quietly. If you're waiting for listings to fix momentum on their own, you'll keep feeling confused. Inventory sets the stage, but psychology decides the pace. And today's buyers are moving by design, not by pressure. Stay with us. Inventory isn't demand anymore. The buyer sellers remember is no longer the buyer making decisions today. That older buyer was shaped by urgency. Scarcity trained them to react quickly, to compete, to secure something before it disappeared. When listings were limited, waiting felt dangerous. Hesitation carried cost. Action felt like protection. That buyer moved emotionally first and justified logically later. They trusted momentum. They trusted the market to carry them forward once they committed. If inventory rose, they stepped in faster, afraid opportunity would vanish again. Listings triggered movement because scarcity still lived in their nervous system. Today's buyers built differently. They are not reactive. They are verification-driven. They do not assume urgency. They test it. They do not move because supply increased. They pause because it did. More listings don't accelerate them. They widened their lens. This shift didn't happen because buyers became fearful or pessimistic. It happened because they learned something through experience. Waiting works. They watched homes sit. They saw sellers adjust. They learned that restraint often improved outcomes. That lesson wasn't theoretical. It was lived. Once someone learns that patience creates leverage, that learning doesn't disappear when conditions change. It becomes conditioning. Buyers stop feeling pressure automatically. They stop equating delay with loss. Optionality becomes safety, not indecision. This is where sellers feel discomfort. They see listings rise and expect buyers to behave the way they used to. When that doesn't happen, confusion sets in. Sellers interpret patience as disinterest. In reality, buyers are more engaged internally than ever. They are verifying assumptions, comparing scenarios, and protecting flexibility before committing emotionally. The old buyer believed speed signaled seriousness. The new buyer believes clarity does. They don't rush to prove intent. They prove intent by staying aligned with their future options. Walking away doesn't feel like failure. It feels like discipline. That identity shift changes everything. It changes timelines. It changes negotiation dynamics. It changes how inventory is interpreted. Sellers wait for urgency that no longer arrives on its own. Buyers wait comfortably, knowing time works for them now. This is why rising listings don't bring buyers back the way sellers expect. The buyer didn't leave. They evolved. They learned a new rule set where pressure is optional and patience is rewarded. Expecting that behavior to reset is the mistake. Psychology doesn't rewind just because inventory increases. Conditioning outlasts cycles, and until sellers recognize that permanent shift, rising supply will continue to feel confusing rather than clarifying. Hit the bell. Buyer psychology doesn't reset. Listings look busy right now, and that busyness is exactly what misleads sellers. Showings are scheduled. Homes are saved. Messages arrive. Conversations feel positive. From the outside, it looks like momentum building. But momentum isn't about visibility. It's about conversion. And that's where the disconnect quietly lives. Showings without offers are the first signal sellers misread. Buyers walk through, ask detailed questions, and leave without urgency. Sellers tell themselves interest is strong and buyers just need time. In reality, buyers are evaluating, not committing. Attention has become low cost. It no longer implies intent. Saved listings create a second illusion. Homes get bookmarked, favorited, revisited. Sellers assume these digital signals mean buyers are warming up. Often, they mean the opposite. Saving a listing now preserves optionality. It allows buyers to delay emotional investment while keeping doors open. Nothing about it promises action. Polite conversations deepen the confusion. Feedback sounds encouraging but vague. We like it. We're considering. We'll circle back. Courtesy replaces clarity. In low-urgency environments, rejection feels unnecessary. Buyers don't say no. They simply stop moving forward. Decision cycles stretch quietly next. What once took days now takes weeks. Sellers reassure themselves that thoughtful buyers are good buyers, but lengthening timelines shift leverage. Time favors the side willing to wait. Buyers know this. Sellers often don't notice it happening. This is where social proof flips. Activity once signaled desirability. Now it signals availability. Buyers assume that if a home hasn't converted, someone else already evaluated it and stepped back. Silence becomes information. Lack of urgency becomes a warning, not reassurance. The most dangerous assumption is equating movement with momentum. Listings can circulate widely without going anywhere. Conversations can feel active without producing outcomes. Visibility feels comforting, but it doesn't protect value. None of this feels dramatic, which is why it works. Buyers don't exit loudly anymore. They disengage quietly. They reduce effort. They extend timelines. They wait for sellers to reveal flexibility. By the time sellers realize activity wasn't confidence, the market has already adjusted psychologically. Options narrowed without confrontation. Leverage shifted without headlines. Understanding these signals early isn't about fear. It's about interpretation. Misreading these signals doesn't cause immediate damage, which is why it persists. The cost shows up later, when adjustments feel heavier and choices feel fewer. Sellers who wait for rejection miss the quieter message buyers are sending. Markets don't punish confidence, they punish assumptions left untested. The earlier you recognize the difference between motion and momentum, the more control you retain, even as conditions soften without ever announcing themselves and costly delayed reactions. Subscribe. Activity isn't confidence. Listings don't rise evenly across markets, and they don't attract buyers evenly either. The first places to see supply increase are often the same places where buyer follow-through weakens fastest. That pattern isn't emotional, it's structural. Long commute suburbs are usually first. These areas expanded on the promise of space and affordability, but patience exposes the hidden cost: time. When urgency disappears, buyers start imagining years of commuting, not just months. Distance that once felt tolerable starts to feel permanent. The house hasn't changed, but tolerance has. As that realization sets in, listings rise while enthusiasm quietly drains. Investor-heavy segments follow closely. When markets were rising, investors absorb supply invisibly. As conditions normalize, that demand pauses. Investors don't negotiate emotionally. They wait. Their absence doesn't make headlines, but it removes momentum. Owner-occupants sense the shift immediately. They begin imagining resale risk instead of upside, even while prices appear stable. Lifestyle-dependent value zones slow next. These markets rely on a specific story, that today's choice secures tomorrow's life. When flexibility mattered less, buyers accepted that trade. Now they test it. If work patterns change, schools shift, or preferences evolve, the narrative feels fragile. When a home depends on everything going right, buyers hesitate. Areas with rising fixed costs compound this effect. Insurance, taxes, and fees rarely shock individually. Together, they reshape psychology. Buyers no longer evaluate price alone. They underwrite long-term predictability. When that predictability weakens, listings rise without commitment. What connects all these markets is not fear, but fragility. Each depends on a narrow assumption, stable schedules, liquid demand, reliable costs. When anyone wobbles, buyers reassess. They don't announce withdrawal. They reduce effort. They wait. This is why listings can rise while buyers step back. The most flexible buyers disengage first, leaving behind demand that is slower, narrower, and more conditional. Sellers miss this because nothing breaks. Homes still show. Numbers still print. But composition changes. By the time price reacts, leverage already moved. Recognizing these patterns early isn't pessimism. It's literacy. Supply always tells you where confidence stands first. Buyers vote with patience, not offers. And every cycle repeats the sequence quietly before charts confirm anything. The mistake is assuming more choice creates urgency. In reality, it creates comparison. Comparison slows decisions. It shifts power toward whoever can wait longest. Buyers know this. That knowledge shapes behavior long before sellers adjust. When listings rise fastest in fragile zones, it isn't coincidence. It's structure revealing itself. Markets don't soften everywhere at once. They release pressure where assumptions are thinnest. That release looks calm. It feels manageable. And that calm is why it matters, because by the time urgency returns, options won't. Sellers who notice now retain choice. Those who wait for confirmation inherit constraint. None of this demands panic. It asks for awareness. Listings rising without buyers isn't failure. It's information. Information about where flexibility ends first. The earlier you read it, the more control you keep. That control comes from seeing structure, not chasing hope. And in every slowdown, structure speaks before price ever does. That gap is where advantage quietly forms for those willing to listen, wait, and respond without rushing. Hit the bell. This pattern repeats every cycle, whether you expect it or not. Again and again, early attention preserves leverage long before numbers ever change. Prices haven't fallen yet. and that calm reassures sellers. Stability feels like proof nothing changed. But price is never the first signal to move. Behavior is. Buyers sense shifts before charts reflect them. Waiting for numbers to change is how people arrive late, surprised, and already constrained by expectations today. One reason prices lag is anchoring. Sellers remember the last clean sale and cling to it. That number becomes identity, not data. Adjusting feels like loss, so patience feels safer. Waiting protects dignity while leverage quietly drifts, unnoticed, toward buyers who are no longer rushing to decide it all calmly. Low distress reinforces this delay. Many sellers don't need to sell. Fixed rates and manageable payments remove urgency. Listings linger without pressure. Sellers read that as strength. Buyers read it as strengthlet. Buyers read it as flexibility. When nobody must act, buyers learn they don't need to either today, tomorrow, or soon at all anymore. Comparable sales deepen the illusion. Comps look backward by design. They measure yesterday's decisions, not today's hesitation. Markets can stall months before data admits it. Buyers understand this instinctively. They don't wait for confirmation. They move behavior first, letting price follow later because patience already proved effective for them personally. This is why buyers aren't waiting for price cuts. They don't need them to gain leverage. Time already does that. Every quiet week strengthens optionality. Sellers waiting for drops feel safe. Buyers waiting for drops feel safe. Buyers waiting feel powerful. That asymmetry grows silently until sellers feel forced to respond under pressure later, reluctantly, unprepared. Price cuts are public admissions that belief changed. Sellers resist them emotionally, not analytically. Meanwhile, buyers adjust privately. They wait, compare, and test boundaries. They know behavior softens before numbers. By the time prices move, leverage already redistributed without drama, leaving late sellers fewer choices than expected. Imagined, planned, hoped. The danger isn't falling prices, it's shrinking options. When sellers finally react, flexibility is gone. Buyers feel confirmed, not opportunistic. This shift happens calmly, without panic or headlines. Understanding it early preserves control. Ignoring it guarantees decisions made under pressure later when time dictates outcomes harshly for everyone involved, Ben. None of this requires fear. It requires attention. Prices will follow behavior, as they always do. Buyers already know that. Sellers who notice early keep choice. Those who wait for confirmation lose it quietly. Subscribe and hit the bell, because signals move first before numbers change publicly anywhere, anytime, again. When buyers stop rushing, leverage doesn't disappear. It redistributes. Most people experience that moment as loss because they're trained to equate speed with control. But in reality, urgency leaving the room creates space, and space is where power quietly reorganizes. Adaptive sellers recognize this first. They stop chasing momentum that no longer exists and start aligning with behavior that does. Instead of waiting for emotional buyers, they design clarity. Pricing becomes intentional. Terms become clean. Friction is removed early. That transparency doesn't weaken their position. It attracts the only buyers still willing to commit, those seeking certainty, not adrenaline. Patient buyers gain leverage at the same time. Without competition forcing compressed decisions, they can evaluate calmly. They ask better questions. They walk away without consequence. That optionality changes posture. Buyers no longer need to prove seriousness through speed. They prove it through preparedness, and preparedness commands respect even in slower markets. Long-term operators thrive here. Investors, relocators, and planners understand that quiet markets reveal structure. They watch which listings actually convert, not which ones generate buzz. They notice where deals stall and why. As urgency fades, mispricing becomes visible, and risk becomes measurable. Decisions stop feeling rushed and start feeling obvious. What connects all three is composure. Control no longer belongs to the loudest or fastest participant. It belongs to the one most aligned with reality. Clarity replaces optimism. Timing replaces boldness. Confidence becomes quiet instead of performative. This shift challenges identity. Many people equate confidence with action. But in this environment, restraint is confidence. Calm operators don't rush to validate belief. They let behavior confirm it. Silence works for them, not against them. Nothing here requires prediction. It requires orientation. When buyers don't rush, markets don't freeze. They rebalance. Leverage flows toward those who stay present, flexible, and honest about conditions as they are, not as they were. If you feel steadier while others feel impatient, that's not hesitation. That's positioning. Stay with us. Clarity is leverage now. Those who adapt early keep options open while others wait for urgency to return. That never does again ever quietly. At the end of all this, the most important truth is simple. The market didn't stall because listings rose. It stalled because buyers changed how they engage. More homes on the screen didn't create urgency because urgency is no longer how decisions are made. Buyers aren't missing this market. They're redefining participation. They still browse. They still tour. They still ask questions. What they don't do is rush to convert curiosity into commitment. They've learned that waiting carries power, and once that lesson is learned, it doesn't disappear just because inventory increases. That's why this moment feels strange. Everything looks like it should work. More options should unlock movement. More choice should create deals. But psychology moves first, and psychology has already shifted. When buyers feel no pressure to act, supply alone can't manufacture momentum. This doesn't mean the market is broken. It means the rules changed quietly. Buyers now engage on their terms. They decide when clarity exists, not when availability increases. They don't fear missing out. They fear locking in too early, and that fear shapes behavior far more than any listing count. If you're watching carefully, you can see this locally. Homes that attract attention but not offers. Conversations that stay warm but never decisive. Time stretching without drama. None of this signals collapse. It signals recalibration, happening one decision at a time. This is where identity matters. Reactors wait for prices, headlines, or external permission. Observers watch behavior. They notice effort, tone, and timing. They understand that markets don't announce transitions. They reveal them through patterns before numbers respond. If you see this, you're not late. You're early. You're recognizing that engagement changed before outcomes did. That awareness doesn't demand action. It preserves optionality and prevents reactive mistakes when pressure eventually appears. That preparation isn't about predicting the future or timing a perfect entry. It's about staying aligned with reality as it unfolds. When behavior shifts quietly, those who notice early gain flexibility, while others wait for certainty that arrives too late. Prepared participants don't rush or freeze. They stay curious, patient, and grounded, allowing the market to reveal its next move without forcing one themselves. Over time, that discipline compounds into confidence, control, and better decisions when conditions finally demand action rather than observation from those still hesitating alone. I'd encourage you to observe your own market with this lens. Where are buyers pausing? Where does silence replace urgency? Share what you're seeing, because collective observation sharpens clarity and reduces noise. In the next video, we'll talk about how time eventually forces price, even without panic or headlines, and why patience reshapes outcomes long before charts do. Stay subscribed. This cycle rewards the prepared,